This episode of The Clear Out was recorded on the 30th of May 2023 at home in Wicklow. And it is an episode in which I talk about process as opposed to end point. Yes, the journey as opposed to the destination. Not for the first time, I also look at response versus reaction, and I talk a little bit about the value of examining and reassessing and checking one's responses, and I look at the value, the benefits of changing patterns. So there's that. That takes up about the first half of the episode. I open with buttercups, so you'll have to check out the start of the episode to get that. And then I speak about a book I finished, James Ellroy's American Tabloid. I talk about a TV show I finished watching, a TV series, Succession. I know I won't be the only person talking about Succession, and that will be spoiler free in case you're worried. And I also talk about a movie that I just went to see with my daughter. Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, which is based on the 1970 Judy Blume novel of the same name, which is I've been led to believe a staple of the American canon for the adolescent or the pre-adolescent reader. So there you go. So that's it. That's what's in the mix today, and I hope you enjoy what you hear. Okay, I'll see you around the corner. Cheers.
Ooh, not gonna change my mind, leaving the dream behind, keep my emoji inside.
Hi, my name is Dara Clear, and you're listening to The Clear Out. You're very welcome. I hope this moment finds you well. Did I tell you about the buttercups? So in the field at the back of our home here in #blessed, there is an abundance currently of buttercups. And because we've been enjoying a particularly lovely spell of weather over the last couple of weeks, the buttercups are particularly lovely. They are resplendent. Or maybe resplendent is not quite the right word, but they really are beautiful. And last week I was throwing a toy for Pepper, the puppy, and she bounded up the steps from the lower garden across the what I call the mezzanine, the upper garden, and through the fence, not over the fence, not under the fence, but through the fence, the top two fence cross pieces, and just bounded across the field, silky, shiny, effortless. And just that sight of her running across the field to get her toy, with towering pine trees at the back of the field underneath a beautiful blue sky, sun beaming down, and tall yellow buttercups everywhere in the field, like these beautiful yellow dots across the grass. It was just a perfect moment. That was this day last week, and I forgot to mention the buttercups last week. I was so taken with them. Yes, very unimaginatively, I took photographs of them and put them on Instagram. That's right, I am the same as every other moron out there. Isn't that pretty? Snap. Instagram. Isn't this pretty? And then wait for the love, the affirmation of what of your opinion of what pretty is to come back. Anyway, the buttercups, they're still there. And there's also clover in the field. So you get those little purple flowers from the clover. And it's just that the vibrancy of the colour is what I find so beguiling. And I was somewhere today and there were several foxgloves, just these stems of foxgloves, again beautiful, just in amazingly great shape and absolutely iridescent in the bright sunlight. And again, I got my stupid phone out and took some stupid photos, and I've yet to put them on Instagram, but I will. Because I want to share the foxgloves. And there's a thing you can do with foxgloves are poisonous, I've been told all my life, but they are actually lovely, foxgloves. And there's a thing you can do with them. If you pinch off the foxglove flower from the base of the petals and just remove it from the stem, and I never feel too bad about this, like from the stalk or the stem, because there's usually a load of foxgloves on it, and you just pinch it at the bottom. And what you're looking for, you don't want the end of the flower to be open, you want it to be closed over. And what you can do is you can just give it a little jab, sort of perpendicular to the palm of your hand, and you get a lovely little snap, a little pop, and there you go. That's something you can try the next time you see foxgloves, because we used to do that as kids. I always thought it was very cool, and I can't stop myself when I see foxgloves, particularly when there's a load of them. And I did 2 or 3 today, and they all popped or snapped beautifully, which was very satisfying. And I always tell myself when I do something like that, and this is what I remember from my school days, that I'm actually helping to pollinate because I'm spreading the flowers around and the pollen that's in the flowers. Yeah, so there you go. Buttercups and foxgloves. Good words, aren't they? Buttercup and foxglove. It's like the name of little fairies or something, or little woodland herbivores, little woodland rodents. Marvellous. Here come foxglove and buttercup. Jesus, I wonder what they're going to be banging on about now. Oh, we just found some berries. They were really delicious. We took some photos and put them up on Instagram. Did you? Yeah. Yeah, it was great. They're so pretty. Is that right, yeah? Yeah. Okay, there you go. So, here we are again. Another attempt. Another attempt at engaging in the moment. Another attempt at reflection. Another attempt at bouncing some ideas around that might somehow constellate into an approximation of something that might resemble something adjacent to wellness. That's the general thrust of what I do here. That's the general aspiration. I sometimes forget why I started this, and I think maybe I did mention it recently, but it was quite motivated by the pandemic. It was quite motivated by the idea that a lot of people were getting battered by the pandemic. A lot of people were just getting emotionally and psychologically crushed by the pandemic, without necessarily contracting COVID. But the restrictions of movement, the restrictions of socialization, the working restrictions, the intermingling restrictions, the general feeling of a large hand closing round our existence. It was overwhelming for many people. My wife and I, our daughter, we found ourselves in the unusual circumstance of having just moved back to Ireland after 10 years away. We moved about a month after the pandemic went large, arriving home in April 2020. And one of the reasons we moved home was to come back and sort of reconnect and plug in to our old network of friends and family and colleagues in the arts, and just to kind of bring our daughter back into that as well. It was definitely part of our motivation for wanting to come back to Ireland, and the pandemic deprived us of that. But we found ourselves in a pretty good place nonetheless. I spoke last week about the idea of safety as it related to environment, the physical spaces we find ourselves living in, occupying, dwelling in, living our lives in, and we've had a pretty good run of luck in that regard. I'm certainly, I never lose sight of that fact. But I'm not sure where I was going with that. Where was I going with that? Why was I talking about coming back, connecting? Oh, yeah, that's right. The podcast. So I just had this sense that there was going to be a need out there in the world, a need for a bit of positivity, a bit of positive reinforcement, and the offering of a safe space. So I suppose I'm extending the theme from last week, and that really was the final driver behind actually just going with the podcast and going, let's get up and running. And of course it was an evolution from the blog that I'd written for 8 years or so before I started the podcast, where I was writing posts about emotional and psychological well-being via personal storytelling, testimony, confessional writing, and other things, vaguely philosophical, psychological, political, sociological, whatever, in that kind of territory. And that's what this has continued to be, except in this form, this audio format. And no matter my other intentions or aspirations for the podcast, namely moving to video and having more interviews, life, the busyness of life, it just seems to keep nudging me back to finding this solitary window once a week to sit down and stick my gob in front of the mic and just talk by myself, which selfishly I find, if I say therapeutic, it's probably overstating it, but it is, it's ritualistic. It's become ritualistic, and I do have a lot of faith in rituals and routines and regimens and putting things in place that I have faith in, that I trust, that I recognize as being of use to me. And that's not making any claim of worth or value beyond that. But I really do get I really do get something from doing this. And maybe it's just astonishingly egotistic. Like maybe it's just me going, oh, isn't this wonderful to spend time with myself and listen to my own voice, which is what I do when I record. I've got the headphones on and I entertain this game of make-believe where as I record this, I imagine I'm talking to you, the listener, the solitary listener. And it is the solitary listener always, because unless you're doing this as a group activity, why don't we sit down and listen to this man who records a podcast once a week at his home in Wicklow in Ireland and shares his thoughts and his feelings on all kinds of things? Will we do that, guys? No. So it won't be a group activity. So it is the solitary listener, even though I know more than one person will listen to this. But I play this game where I'm talking to you, and that's a very intimate thing. And I think that's the appeal of many, many podcasts. Well, I'm sorry, I should clarify, particularly solo podcasts with the solo speaker, the solo presenter, where you get that one voice in your ears. Because it's a different thing when you're listening to a conversation between 2, 3, 4 speakers. You're invited into a different dynamic. And I've enjoyed the few interviews I've done, but I continue to allow myself to be a little bit stymied by my technical and technological limitations, and I just haven't carved out the time to educate myself and step up. And I've no shortage of guinea pigs. I've got friends who would be happy to be interviewed. I mean, in fact, apart from Aisling Cregan, who I interviewed around this time last year, a bit earlier than this, last year, when I interviewed her about her brilliant book, I Am Someone. Otherwise, everyone I've had on the show is someone I know personally, a friend, or if not a friend, a wife, my wife, which was the last interview I did in January, I think that was. But I wasn't thinking about this podcast specifically earlier, but I was thinking about the idea of how we're motivated or how we're oriented, and what gives us a sense of purpose, a sense of drive. And I was kind of recognizing in myself earlier that I'm really not and this really ties in very well with my general philosophy of celebrating anonymity and mediocrity and underachievement and sort of lo-fi normalcy. I'm not really goal oriented. I'm not really achievement oriented. Now, I'm looking at that statement and I recognise that it might sound a bit disingenuous. I do get a bit motivated by numbers. I'm like, oh look, it's episode 106, how exciting. And I see that as a demonstration to myself of a demonstration of discipline, a demonstration of consistency, a demonstration of being able to stick to something. And I value that because I suppose what I project into that is a sort of a stability and a reliability. And these are things I value in people. These are things I value in myself. And I know that comes from childhood. I know that comes from, disappointment in certain relationships within my family, certain other relationships, and feeling disappointed or let down, or I can't trust that person. They're not dependable. So again, this is a bit of a callback to last week's episode, looking at the idea of interpersonal safety, the safety of relationships. And I did get burned in the last few days. I got a little snap back from someone very close to me, and I was like, okay, I've experienced that before, and it's I don't take that stuff lightly. I don't take it lightly. It doesn't just bounce off me. It hits me in a very particular place, and I don't like it. And it undermines my faith and my confidence in a relationship when that happens. And I check myself. I check myself and go, hold on a second. Are you just being oversensitive? Are you not? Can you not withstand that? Are you not a bit more resilient than that at this stage of your life? No. No, I'm not. It depends where it comes from. This is the point. It depends where it comes from. And when you get that experience coming from someone you love, it's I don't care for it. It's not my concept of love within any relationship, romantic or otherwise. But I'm trying to look at that. I mean, maybe I need to sort of renegotiate my comfort with other people's anger. I don't know, and it's not to be too what's the word I'm looking for? Too sort of concessionary, too willing to make concessions, too willing to accommodate or absorb or make more room or give away room I had for myself for someone else's stuff. It's not about that, but it's about being willing to look at my own thinking, because if I'm finding I have the same reaction to certain stimuli, certain provocations, certain situations, and the reaction I'm having is not one I like, of course I can, I think like anybody else, the first thing I do is you look at, well, what's actually unfolded here, what's actually happened, why did this thing come to pass? And I can look at the other party involved and go, okay, where's that coming from? And that'll partly help the understanding. But that's only one part of the equation. It's only one part of the frame, one part of the dynamic. And I think it's, if you're truly interested in understanding yourself, it's worth checking your own responses and checking whether, and I'm sure I've spoken about this before, but checking whether they're still serving you. So when I find myself in a situation where I'm a bit rattled or triggered or upset, I find it easy to go, I know why I'm upset. I know who's annoyed me or what's annoyed me. But I think I'm becoming more interested in examining if examining my own reaction, my own response, and I have previously often made a distinction between reaction and response, arguing that to respond has more agency in it than reaction. Reacting can be more reflexive, and responding can be more thoughtful, more considered, more, and have more kind of control in it. But both of those things can be examined, and I think it's worth looking at. Okay, this is the frame I've been using. This is my normal response, or this is the normal formula I use to process this kind of situation. But is that still serving me? Can it be reassessed? Can I sort of water test it and see, does this still work for me? Because I think there's potential for growth there. I think there's potential for opening a new path that gives me, in this situation, gives me more power for myself. Not more power over the other person, but more power for myself, and more options in terms of how I might choose to respond. Because if I just repeat the same reaction, the same response, then there's no change. There's no change to the pattern. There's no change to the cycle. And I mean, I've had that belief for a long time, that if within a relationship, if there's a pattern that continues to hit the same flashpoints, the same obstacles, we can often fall into the position of blaming the other party and expecting them to change, or waiting for them to change, or hoping that they'll change, and not looking at ourselves and thinking, well, hold on a second, what am I doing here to help affect change? What can I do that would actually create an actual change in the pattern? Because when the pattern changes, then the other party will come round to that stage of the previous pattern where there's normally a flashpoint, and go, oh, they're not there. And therefore they have to change the pattern as well, because there's nothing for them to butt up against. There's no conflict, and they have to find a new path. So yeah. So there you go. There I go. Yeah. So how that connects to what I was previously talking about, I can't remember. The reason I can't remember is because you probably won't be aware, because I've had to pause the recording a couple of times because I was getting really unpleasant interference on the track, which when I played it back I realised was getting picked up and recorded, so it would have been unpleasant for you as well. So I've had about 2 or 3 interruptions over the last little while, and I've had to pause and come back and pause and come back and delete some track and try and drop in. So I felt I was on quite a nice flow before, and that is no longer the case. But so be it. It is what it is. I know there were other things I wanted to talk about. I will try to conclude that point, this idea of not being goal-oriented, not being achievement-oriented. And I'll just hit you with the cliche of, it's not the destination, it's the journey. And I'm using that annoying voice, to sort of patronise that cliche, because sometimes these things are thrown out like they're a great pearl of wisdom, and they just sound empty and naff, and that's why I don't like them. But I am going to essentially say the same thing. Excuse me, sorry. See, instead of saying the journey, I'm gonna use a different phrase or a different word, and that's that, the process. And that is really where I try to live, is with the process. And the process implies perhaps an end point. What's the process? By what process do we achieve this aim? By what process do we get to where we need to get? And for me, the process is connected to staying in touch with beliefs and staying in touch with a personal philosophy. And I'd argue that anyone can obviously interpret that their own way. Anyone can create their own sort of touchstones, their own system of pathfinding, their own system of stabilisation, if that's what you want. I mean, I'm not making any assumptions here that everybody wants stability. And my kind of stability is not the kind of stability that my wife craves. Because my wife, and you'll know if you've been listening, if you're listening to last week's episode, I did say that when I refer to my wife as my wife, I'm usually going to raise an area of conflict between us. And when I speak about my wife and it's something nice and harmonious and something good, I usually call her by her name, Kiara. But I was about to say my wife's the stability that my wife craves is economic stability, and I crave internal stability, the kind of emotional and psychological stability that I believe will serve me best to cope with the outside, the external instability. And I'm not saying that I'm right and she's wrong, nor that I'm wrong and she's right. It's a different focus, and it's a different orientation. And I suppose it would be fair, based on that, to argue that Kiara is more goal-oriented than I am, and that definitely leads to tension. That definitely leads to conflict in our relationship. But I don't. When I say that, I don't want to. I'd be resistant to characterizing myself as unmotivated or lacking ambition. It's just my faith is located in a completely different area, and maybe that's absolutely naive, unrealistic, delusional, somehow. I don't want to over egg this pudding. I was going to throw in some more sort of damning, indicting descriptives for myself, but it's just different. And if you go back to what I was saying before about being willing to examine my reactions and responses, I have to be willing to examine my faith in the process. If it's actually not serving me and us, because my relationship, my marriage, my status as a father, a family man, that these are things that are very important to me. And if I'm sort of ennobling and valorizing and glorifying on some level my process, my personal philosophy, my path, my regimen, at the expense of greater functionality in the family and in my relationship, well then, then it's kind of it's fallacious. It's not working. It's a nonsense, because it's not just about me, and there's a balance to be struck. I think I'm not too bad at that balance. I know my wife. I really feel like I've exposed myself here. I know my wife would take a very different view of that, and that's something we continue to negotiate. I don't know if it's a negotiation at all. It's something we continue to avoid talking about. But I mean, that's a relationship, and yeah, there's always the possibility of evolution. Yeah, I'm gonna stop here before I go any further. I've gone further than I thought I would. Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, I suppose that what I tried to say to conclude this half of the podcast is, think about your process. Think about what you've put in place. Do think about the journey, and how you're spending time with yourself. Now again, that's not meant to be an exercise in vanity or narcissism or self-indulgence, but it definitely is meant to be connected to self-care, self-regard, self-esteem, self-love, in the best possible sense, in the sense of nurturing and minding. I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. In fact, I think that's really, really valuable. And to be able to apportion part of your energy, your mental and emotional energy, to that task of keeping yourself well, of being mindful of what works for you and what doesn't work for you. I mean, it's only to the benefit of everybody else in your life, because the more at ease we are with ourselves, the better we're able to direct our energy outwards, to share with others. And I think that is, I believe that's a recipe for some level of happiness anyway, and certainly a level of fulfillment, because that social connection is really important to most humans, I believe. Okay, so I'm gonna move on, and yeah, just move into the world of the arts, in the form of a novel, a TV series, and a movie. And this will touch on a couple of things, and it will touch on something I was just talking about in terms of the journey, not the destination. Because I just finished watching Succession. Now, there'll be no spoilers here. I've seen somebody I know throw some stuff up on Twitter, and it's spoiler adjacent, if not spoiler itself, and I'm just like, what the hell? Don't be throwing stuff up like the day after the show or 2 days after the show's been on. A lot of people need a bit longer than that to get up to speed. But anyway, grand. I'll be I won't be doing any spoilers. But Succession, if you're not aware of that series, is about a media mogul and his grown-up children and their infighting, their desperation, their dysfunction, their trauma, their greed, their brokenness, and their extraordinary privilege and wealth and venality and immorality, and it's been a fascinating series to watch, and does what so many really well written TV shows do, which is bring you into a world that you're not really familiar with, and it doesn't hold your hand. You're just immersed into the milieu and the sort of the language, the lingo, the sort of you know, the dressings and the codes of that world, and you just, you know, it's catch up or die. It's keep up or die. And yeah, you just have to roll with it. And I think, you know, there have been some great shows that have done that. I think Deadwood was one, the sort of Baroque Western series, that really, I think, was extraordinarily well written, you know, theatrical and Jacobean almost, and it's, you know, in the sort of the power of its language, its script, the fearlessness, the kind of dark poetry of the language, really excellent. And you could argue that Succession is very much in that territory, in a different mode, but very similar in that kind of immersive, you know, the immersiveness of what you're dropped into as the spectator, as the watcher, as the audience member, and those characters, the characters of Succession, are really gloriously unattractive. They're gloriously sort of abhorrent, and yet they're gripping, and you want to spend time with them. And that's the journey, isn't it? It's not the destination. It's like, what are they going to do next? What's going to evolve or devolve? Who's going to do what to whom and how? And yeah, it's been quite the ride, but really, really good. And I don't know. I mean, do we watch a show like that and feel reassured, or do we feel horrified? Does it make us fear for the future? Does it make us feel superior? And, you know, in that regard, it's a kind of weird inverted social pornography, you know, where we're looking down our noses at the extraordinarily wealthy and privileged. We're looking down our noses at the 1%. Look at how unhappy they are. Look at how broken and damaged and traumatized they are. Ha ha ha. I'm glad I'm not them. I don't know. I don't know if that's another fallacy. But in any case, brilliantly written, brilliantly acted, and I mean, does it make me more interested in that sort of high-powered world of massive business deals and media manipulation and politics and the media influence on who gets to sit in what seat of power? Not really. The world is a very corrupt, venal place, and desperately ambitious, power-hungry, influential people they're not really, I don't know, they're not really worried about consequences, because that's the great sort of get out of jail free card that is being in that kind of 1%, that extraordinary privilege, that extraordinary remove from, you know, from the rest of the world, from the rest of society. Something that was epitomized at the end of the very first episode, I think more than anything else in the whole show, where there was a family baseball game, and the son, Roman, so brilliantly played by Kieran Culkin. It was Kieran Culkin, isn't it? It's not the other Culkin. I know it's not Macaulay, but there's a third Culkin, isn't there? Anyway, the son, Roman, offers one of the son of one of the kind of staff members, like maybe the groundskeeper, a family that appeared to be perhaps Mexican, and he offers the son $1 million if he can, like, hit a home run or just, you know, do well in a moment of the game. And it's extraordinary pressure, and the boy fails to do what he's been asked, and this check for $1 million is kind of ripped up in front of him, and it's just this very cruel moment of privileged frivolity that to me just summed up the entire thing. So you had that at the end of the very first episode. I was like, okay, this is what we're dealing with here. And other than that, it's just soap opera, isn't it? It's just soap opera. It's families fighting with one another, which is that is the stuff of soap opera. The book I just finished reading is a book I spoke about ages ago. And it's not that I'm a really slow reader. I just put the book down and didn't come back to it for a long time. But I finally finished reading James Ellroy's American Tabloid, which I probably started reading a year ago. And I'm asking myself, have I read anything in the meantime other than, you know, sports coverage of my football team, and other things of that nature? And the answer, sadly, is probably not. But American Tabloid, my goodness, like, talking about horrible characters. And that, again, was a matter of just enjoying being in the company of really dark, devious, amoral characters, men, you know, close to power, men with power, and ruthless, brutal, violent, damaged men, and just told in that classic James Ellroy way, just a real no bullshit writer, you know, brutal and unafraid and gratuitous, and you're just left in no doubt as to the depths to which people will sink to get what they need, to or even just the depths to which they'll sink as an expression of who they are, as an expression of the kind of the human animal that they are. Just a great creator of characters, James Ellroy, where you really get inside their heads and walk in their shoes. Absolutely brilliant. And all that it's like it's 600 pages thereabouts that culminate in the very final moments before the assassination of John F. Kennedy, and it's just a brilliant sort of tapestry of sordid scheming and plotting and ambition and backstabbing. In the various houses of power in America, including the CIA, Bobby Kennedy's Attorney General, the Mafia, the White House, obviously. Yeah, really, really great stuff. Highly recommended if you haven't read it. But I mean, I don't know how old that book is. Is it 20 years old? Is it as old as that? But yeah, it packs a punch. So yeah, and again, the journey, being on the journey with those characters. I mean, I think that's I think that's a very common way to experience a good book and not wanting the book to end, because you're just enjoying being in that world. You're just enjoying being with those characters. And in this case, just like Succession, American Tabloid, you're with characters that you're really, well, I found myself, you're repelled by them, but also sort of fascinated by them. And there's that the car crash impulse where you want to crane your head to see the damage, and you're waiting to see what sort of a sticky end the characters are going to come to. And the payoff is it's the payoff in both cases kind of tragic and maybe a bit pathetic, and certainly I think that was going to be the ultimate point of Succession, but I won't say any more than that. The other thing I took in, the movie, and this is this raises a little question for me, but my daughter and I went to see the film of the Judy Blume book, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. And so I took Maeve to see the movie last Friday night. So Chiara was away doing a gig. She was doing a Leonard Cohen gig down in Waterford and the Royal Theatre there, just on keys and some backing vocals. But she was away. I knew she was going to be away and not home till late, and so I thought for a treat, myself and Maeve would go to the cinema. So we did that. We went out and we had a sort of a dinner. We went to good old Eddie Rockets and indulged ourselves in burgers and fries and shakes, and then we went to watch that movie, which I was quite keen to see, and it's been on my radar a little bit. And in fact, Kay, who is, I know, a regular listener to the podcast and one of the patrons of the show, Kay also recommended to me the Judy Blume documentary. So I can't remember what that's called, but there's a documentary about Judy Blume, the American author, and this movie is the movie based on one of her most popular books of the same title, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, which is, I suppose, a coming of age story about a young girl who's just on the cusp of adolescence, pubescence, and it's her story of anticipating what it's going to be to get her period, and at the same time negotiating a move from trendy, cool New York to the suburbs of New Jersey, and negotiating religious faith, and kind of the family dynamics, grandparents with different aspirations for the spiritual path she'll follow, and working out who her real friends are and what it is to have a little sisterhood of pals, and who, what way the ringleader will push them, and the little kind of deceits that play out between them, and then the desperation, the absolute palpable desperation to mature, to hit certain watershed moments, certain landmarks, to become, in this case, to become a young woman. And I thought the movie was brilliant. I thought it was absolutely brilliant. We really enjoyed it, both of us. And we were the only ones in the cinema, apart from another parent and child. There was a mother and daughter there. The daughter was a little bit older than Maeve. And that was it. And we were, the four of us were sitting in the back row of a small theatre. But I thought it was brilliant. I just thought it was so well told. I've spoken about the importance of tone in film, the importance of tone, and when you're in the hands of a good director, a great director, that tone is never something you have to think about, because everything just fits and feels right. And that was very much the case here. So the movie was directed by Kelly Freeman Craig, who 7 years ago directed a movie called The Edge of 17, which, even by the title you might guess, is in similar territory, about a girl who is kind of at that later stage of high school and going through a lot of stuff. I thought that was I think that's a really good movie as well. A really nice performance from Woody Harrelson in that movie, and I've just gone blank on the lead actress's name in that. I want to say Haley. Is it Haley Senfeld? She was the actress who was in the Coen Brothers Rooster Coburn remake. I think it's Haley Seinfeld. Is it Senfeld? Anyway, you know the one I'm talking about. If you've seen that Coen Brothers movie, that was really, really good. But this one was excellent. And the actress who played Margaret is a actress called Abby Ryder Fortson, and she was great. She was just really, really funny and believable and vulnerable and emotional. And the cast throughout was really, really good. Really kind of believable, true characters. And Kathy Bates was in there too as a very involved Jewish grandmother, and plays her brilliantly. Kathy Bates, you kind of can't go wrong. She really, you think of how she broke out with Misery all those years ago. She is so solid. You really don't get a bum note with Kathy Bates. And my daughter was delighted when I pointed out to her that Kathy Bates was she was the Molly Brown character, wasn't she, in James Cameron's Titanic, which has become a favourite movie of Maeve's. But it was interesting to watch that, and obviously, of course, I'm highly aware that I'm watching this and it's about 11-year-old or 12-year-old girls getting their periods and their sort of anxiety around that, their fear, their anticipation, what it represents. And I'm watching that with my daughter, who's 9.5, so not quite there yet. And I suppose there was potential. I was very aware that this might be something that might plant a bit of anxiety in my daughter. But it was funny, the fact that she'd watched Pixar's Turning Red last year, which deals with very similar territory in a very different way, because it involves giant red pandas, and like a family curse. But like emotionally, it does tap into very similar territory, and kind of the mortification and unknowability of that experience for a girl to whom it hasn't happened yet, and certainly for a father for whom it's never happened. Although, of course, I've been around it through my relationships since I was a young man. But because my daughter had seen Turning Red, it kind of laid the ground. So this wasn't uncharted territory, and I think she just took it for what it was. I mean, and at one point she did lean into me, because there was a stage in the story where Margaret is really engaging with her sort of religious quest and what her religious identity might be. And Maeve leaned into me and said, like, why have we gone from periods to religion? And I said, don't worry, I'm sure the periods will come back. And okay, spoiler alert, yeah, periods do come back. But, it's not really a spoiler, because that book was written in 1970 and the movie set in 1970. And yeah, I thought it was great. I thought it was great. So now I've got, two of my favourite kind of, is it a girl movie? Like, I mean, I'm going to throw it in there with Greta Gerwig's Little Women. And, so now I've got two favourites about, kind of the young woman experience, the young woman perspective, young woman's kind of rites of passage and their wrestles with identity and womanhood. But just really, really well done. And couldn't be further from the characters in Succession, couldn't be further from the characters in American Tabloid. And I enjoyed each thoroughly. I probably was far more moved by Margaret and her friends in Are You There, God, It's Me, Margaret. And I don't know if that makes me very sentimental, or if it makes me empathetic, or if it just makes me a big sap, a big soppy git. But I think those stories, when they're told well, are very moving. And I don't know. I mean, I it's funny. I'm thinking of, I've seen it as a karate teacher over the years, when you've got stuff, when you're working with kids to whom what they're doing is so important. And I'm thinking of karate, and maybe karate competitions or karate gradings in particular. And you can see with some kids, they just wear it on their sleeve so much more, and you can see how important it is to them. And you can see the pain of failure, as well as the sort of exhilaration of success. And I mean, I've always found it incredibly powerful, incredibly moving, and to be in the role of, being in the role of teacher or mentor or sensei or whatever the hell it might be, and to be involved in that, not always directly, sometimes just peripherally, because that teaching load is spread around. It's it's a real privilege to be close to that, and I don't know. I mean, I kind of welcome that. I think it's sad if you can't sort of tap into that and kind of share that kind of energy with a kid when it means so much. I'm just kind of looking at my own sort of response to that. Like, what does it actually mean? Is it empathy? Is it understanding? Does it mean maybe it means I'm still very in touch with the child in myself? I mean, I think that's true. I don't really have any issue with that. I can relate to adults very well also, and I think I can relate to kids pretty well. But I think when those to bring it back to the movies, like when those stories are told well, I think it's I think it's very powerful, and I welcome those stories. I think I think they're great. So that was good. That was a really nice. That was a great night we had. We really enjoyed the movie, and I know Maeve was she was very tired the next day because that was a late night. And one final thing, sticking with my daughter. Last week I was talking about how I mentioned that Maeve was saying how much she'd like to win a medal, and I was laughing because she didn't seem particularly, she didn't seem as interested in, the process. She just wanted the achievement. But funnily enough, today I had a little text sent out from the school, just, I get the little school news updates, and it was announcing the results of community games competition results for art and writing. And I just kind of scanned through the text, and next thing, there's Maeve's name, and she'd won first prize in the art category for girls in her age group. And lo and behold, when I came home today, there she was with a lovely gold medal around her neck. And that was pretty amazing. And when I got the text, I was absolutely delighted for her. I just felt so chuffed for her. And yeah, it was great. She was a bit blasé about it when I came home because she had a pal here. But yeah, she was keeping that medal close nonetheless. And she was like, "Yeah, but it's just for art." And I said, "It doesn't matter. It's it's a medal. The universe was listening." So there you go. Is that a nice note to end this on? I think it is. Okay, I will love you and leave you, and I'll be back next week with something else, something different, something similar, another step in the process. So as always, you can throw me some love on social media. You'll find the links wherever you're listening to this episode. If you want to get involved in a more meaningfully supportive way, I shouldn't say more meaningfully because it's not, but if you want to throw some money at the podcast, that's pretty blunt, isn't it? You can. This is an independent production that I do actually put a lot of heart and soul into, and it is something that I hope will lead to other things at some point in the future. And getting that little investment from a listener, it is motivating, and it is an affirmation, and it does restore my faith that this is not a futile project. And I know it's not a futile project because I get something out of it anyway. But feel free to support me using the supporter link, where you can make a one-off contribution, or by becoming a patron using the Patreon link. That's patreon.com/theclearout. Otherwise, like, rate, comment, share, subscribe. I'd welcome the support in whatever form it comes. Okay, that's it. We're done for another week. Please do mind yourselves. Stay safe. Okay? All right, take it easy. I'll talk to you soon. See ya. Bye.